Hello and welcome. I'm Colin Earle, the CEO and founder of Agiloft, and thank you for joining our 2018 Spring Release webinar. I'm delighted to introduce the latest product enhancements and would like to start with a quick overview of the commercial success that's funding our accelerating investment in the product. In 2017, in-house sales grew 45%, and that money is being reinvested in growing our development team, adding additional tutorial videos, and adding support and implementation staff. Partner revenue doubled in 2017, and partners are active members of our new community forum, where you can chat directly with our staff and other users. If you haven't joined yet, I encourage you to check it out at community.agiloft.com. Your support username and password gives you immediate access. In 2017, Agiloft won PC Magazine Editor's Choice Award for Best Contract Management Software for the third year in a row. The Spend Matters Value Award for Contract Management Software, Infotech's Champion Award for Best Service Desk Software, and the Best Value Award for the fourth year in a row, and the ABA Award for Best Platform as a Service. In addition to the software upgrades, we've made a number of infrastructure upgrades. We've completed build-out of a hybrid hosting infrastructure with master servers at vExchange in Santa Clara that replicate in real time to AWS servers in Virginia, so service is no longer dependent on a single provider. Now, vExchange is Silicon Valley's premier hosting facility, but if it were to be taken down, service can continue from AWS. Incidentally, the master servers are also replicated to redundant servers at vExchange in addition to the slaves at AWS, so you have full double redundancy. And of course, all the servers use RAID SSD drives. As promised last year, we now provide hosting in Canada, in addition to Ireland and Australia, to support local data privacy laws. We have audited and upgraded our security and privacy policies to be fully GDPR compliant, and the white paper and hosting agreement are available from our website. Happily, we were well prepared for GDPR because Agiloft is always focused on security. For example, the core functionality allows you to control who can access and view data right down to the level of individual records and fields. You can also keep an audit trail of all actions. All data can be encrypted at rest and in transmission, and all traces of an individual's data can be removed from the database and history. And we have developed a script to remove all traces from the log files. And now I'd like to hand over to Craig Gordon, one of our most senior implementers, to demonstrate the new functionality.
Thank you, Colin. Before we get started with the technical portion, if you have any questions, please use Zoom's chat feature. You should see it in the controls at the bottom of your screen, or you can use Alt-H to bring up the chat window. Okay, now for a quick overview of some of the features we'll be talking about. First, we have providing a more modern look and feel and control over design. Personalized left pane with table grouping. The folks who have been testing this internally love how much it simplifies the interface. We've also extended searching to charts and reports, so it's easier to find any given report. There's more flexibility around filling forms and more user-friendly KB management. The mobile interface now adapts automatically to screen size. We've made Agiloft more scalable with the ability to distribute read operations across multiple database servers and support tens of thousands of concurrent users. You can merge multiple documents into a single Word or PDF document. We've added the ability to mass sync SAML user information with a SAML server for full synchronization and better security. And finally, we've integrated with Microsoft SCCM for asset polling and discovery. Now let's go through these and talk about some of them in more detail. Okay. So here we are with our standard staff interface. This is actually our out-of-the-box presentation for this project, so we've made some updates here. So first thing I want to point out is in the left pane here, notice above our tables, we've added the left pane grouping. So now you can take all the tables you want and group them into the different sections you want to use in your left pane. So here in our out-of-the-box presentation, we've taken these standard functions that people like using us for. So we have contract management and service desk, and we put these into different sections so you can easily contract or expand the different areas for people to be able to find the tables they're working with. So let me come into the setup and show you how this is configured. So under the left pane setup here, notice now that this is going to be these left pane groupings, these are set up by teams. So before it was just user permissions that would determine whether or not they were going to see a table. Now, in addition to those permissions, you can decide the groupings are going to be based on the user team. So you can decide the sales team might have one particular set of table groupings, while the service team or the contract management team might have another grouping. This lets you take the functions that are going to be used by each team and sort of highlight them in the left pane for them. Now, once the admin has come in here and configured it for each team, each individual user still has their own personal preferences. So I can come in here for myself and modify what I'm going to see just personally. So the green bolding here means this is a table that I'm going to see in the left pane. And if you scroll down, you can see replacement variable does not have that bolding. If I select it and add, now it's bolded. And if I remove it, it goes back to normal. So this lets you quickly tell which tables you've added or not. And in addition, part of the reason for this is that you can add tables in multiple groupings. So here under contract management, we have the contract table, but I can also add it under another grouping if I want to. So let's just select that, move it over, and now I'll drag it where I want it. So now the contract table is going to appear in two different groupings for me. This lets you maybe put your favorite tables, the ones you reference the most often, in a small grouping up at the top, and then have all the others in their standard sections at the end. So in addition to putting in the different groupings that you want, putting the tables where you want them, you can also add separators. And a separator is just a little visual divide between tables, so I'm putting it here after the approvals. And once you're done configuring everything for your own personal needs, you just click Finish. And you can see there it's updated automatically. There's the little divider I put in. And if I expand the contract setup area, there's the second appearance of the contracts table. So that's the new left pane grouping, how you can set up those groups for different teams and distribute them, and then how individual users can come in and modify their own personal appearance. Now let's come down to the approvals table, right? And I'm going to show you up here at the top, actually. Notice it already says My Approvals. That's because it's now showing the name of the saved search. So whenever you run a search, it's going to be displaying that name up at the top along with the table name. And if I come in here and say Show All, then the search name disappears. Right? If I click My Approvals again, now it comes back. So whenever you're running a search, then the search name will show up at the top along with the table name for easy reference, so you know exactly which records you're looking at. Now I've got 35 records here. You can see that's quite a few, so I need to scroll a bit to see them all. Notice as I'm scrolling, though, that the action bar and the search terms up at the top, they stay fixed. So we've got a bit of a scroll lock happening here, so that as I scroll down through the records, the action bar and all the information I might need to reference stays visible at the top, so I can still use it. Okay, so that's a couple of quick changes to the table view here. Now let's come down to the service requests, and we'll talk about some new changes in the forms themselves. So I'm going to just create a new service request. And up at the top, I'm just going to fill in a couple of our fields here. We've got our priority, we've got our summary here. Okay. Now, if I keep scrolling down, you see our standard areas down here. But there's this new little arrow here next to submitter information. In fact, anywhere you have a text divider now, this is now a collapsible section. So anytime you put in a text break, you can then collapse that section or expand it. This lets you have more longer forms that have a more vertical scrolling, but lets the user collapse them to easily reference those areas. You might notice up at the top as I have the options to expand or collapse. As I change it, my options up here at the top change also. So collapsible text dividers is a new enhancement for form use. Now next, notice here the service category and service, these are some required fields that I haven't yet filled in. If I try and save the record, I get a nice little pop-up here telling me, hey, you haven't filled in these required fields. But there's a new enhancement for action buttons. So now with action buttons, these are configured by the admin, of course. For action buttons, you can set them to skip required fields or automation. So I can click this action button, and it's actually going to save the record for me without requiring those extra fields be filled in. And notice it says it was successfully created. Those fields are still blank. If I click cancel, there's my new record that I just created, and I can open it back up for editing. You see there's the information I put in before. So the record is actually saved, but there's still empty fields required there. Now, of course, use this with caution. This is usually used if you have a longer form and someone's going to be going through multiple tabs and you want sort of a save and continue button at the bottom. So this lets you keep working on the form while you might not really have all of the required information yet. Okay. Now the next piece I want to point out, notice the tabs up at the top here. Actually, let's collapse that section. Notice the tabs up at the top here. We go from details to working, related records, and then a few others. Now under our service category, I'm going to select human resources and then say new employee setup. As soon as I select new employee setup, we get a new tab up here at the top for tasks. So we've always had field visibility, showing or hiding fields based on choices the user has made. That's now been extended to tabs as well. So if a tab has no fields visible on it, we're going to hide the entire tab. So if I unselect this service, the task tab goes away. If I reselect it, it comes back. So we've got the collapsible text dividers. We've got action buttons that are able to skip required fields or automation. And we've got visibility conditional tasks as well. Okay. Now let's switch over and I'm going to talk about some charts and report pieces. The first thing we might notice is that there's this new chart type here. So you can now choose ring charts among the other chart types if you want to use those. You might also notice that these colors here are a bit different than our usual chart color scheme, and we're going to be getting to that in just a second. Now I'm going to come into the charts and reports for contracts here. And notice we have a search option here. This is the big change for the chart and report view here is this search option. So if you have staff members who have created lots of charts or reports and you're having trouble scrolling through them all, finding particular ones, you can now search to find exactly the ones you're looking for, usually based on the description or title and any keywords the users might have put in. Okay. Now let's go into the look and feel scheme. There's a few changes there I want to point out also. Oops. Staff schemes. Let's go into our current color scheme here. Okay. So one of the first changes here is that there is a chart and reports tab in the look and feel scheme. So now you can make other changes to how the charts and reports are presented. And down at the bottom, here's the big thing I want to point out is this color palette. So I mentioned that the colors on the chart were a bit different than our standard. It's because you can now define a color palette to use on your charts. And again, this is in the look and feel scheme, so this is going to be applied for different teams. So you could have different teams of users that have different color schemes for their charts if they wanted to. So you can come in here and define this palette, and it's just going to apply the colors in order for any charts that are generated. The other piece I want to point out here on the global tab is the ability to upload custom fonts. So the purpose of this enhancement is in case there are fonts that you want to use that aren't necessarily installed on all the user machines. This lets you upload those fonts so that they're used by the system regardless of the user machine. The example we're using here is Carlito. So Carlito is an open source font that looks a lot like Calibri. Calibri is one of our favorite fonts, but it isn't installed by default on Macintosh. So our Macintosh users weren't seeing our default font there. They were failing over to a different font use. So now we were able to upload Carlito and have it as a part of the system. So all of our Macintosh users or anyone else that doesn't have Calibri installed will be seeing Carlito, which is very similar instead. Now, as I mentioned a few times, this is currently our out-of-the-box scheme. So we've put in this font and we put in that color palette for the charts and reports, as well as the table grouping. All of this in our color scheme here. So for those of you who haven't moved away from our default color scheme or maybe just want it in your project as a reference point, it is available for download. It's here in our wiki under the sync import section right here. So this can be downloaded as an entity set and then imported into your project to give you the new look and feel scheme. So then you can switch over to it or use portions of it for yourself as you want. Next, let's switch over to look at some more behind the scenes pieces here. So first under setup, access. I'm going to talk about the SAML piece here. So I mentioned what we have now is we've expanded SAML integration for a mass sync. So previously, SAML user information was only pulled over when the user logged in. That meant if a user hadn't logged into the system yet, we didn't know who they were. This could cause an issue if you wanted to assign something to someone who hadn't logged in yet, or send them an email or mark them as an approver. So now you can do a mass sync with SAML to pull over all the users at once to get all their information in for referencing. The next piece here is the SCCM integration. So this is not deployed by default, and this is used for asset polling and discovery. So SCCM integration, when you deploy it, it adds the extra tables and fields as are needed. Then you can then configure it to talk with your particular SAML instance to be able to pull over all the asset information. For an example of kind of how that looks afterwards, here's the results where we've been running our own, syncing with our own SAML install where we're for our demonstrations. And you can see some of the information, the asset information and types that are added here. Now, another piece while we're talking about this synchronization on these integrations is we now automatically distribute read operations across multiple databases in a cluster to allow scaling to potentially tens of thousands of users at once. So if you have a giant end user organization with all these, giant end user organization with tens of thousands of users at once, or integration with other systems, those are all now supported. Now next I want to talk about the mobile interface a little bit. So we're continuing to make visual updates to the mobile interface. Now looks a lot more friendly. Here you can see examples of last open charts and reports or recent searches, some examples of accessing how other screenshots accessing those charts and reports, or the table view. Here you can see them. So in general, just more general updates to make the mobile interface look more friendly. And actually, as you can see directly in some of these shots, based on the width of your device, the interface is going to update automatically. So your standard vertical, and then if you flip it sideways, it updates automatically to the new dimensions. Okay, pull that over here. And now finally, let's go into the table setup a little bit. The last two pieces I want to talk about are in here. So first of all, we have a new left pane tab in the table setup. I'm just in the setup for the contract table. So our new left pane tab, this goes along with the left pane groupings. So before, of course, like I said, whether or not a user saw a table was just based on their permissions. Now with the left pane groupings, if you're modifying a single table, maybe you're adding some modules or functionality, or just revisiting some older pieces, you can now determine which groupings you want this table added to directly from the table setup. So you can add or remove these tables individually from these different groupings as you want. The next piece I want to point out is there's a new Actions tab here. So the actions themselves were always accessible either through an action button or through a rule. But now if you want to look at a particular action to see what it's doing or modify it, instead of tracking down where it's being referenced, you can just come to the Actions tab to modify it directly. And you can see here, you can also create new actions here. Of course, you'll need to add them to a rule or a button to actually trigger them. And then down at the bottom, we have all of the actions themselves. Now, the final piece I want to talk about is our merge document action. So let's open this up. Now, the merge document action, we've had this for a bit, but always merging to a PDF file. So this often comes up in contract management scenarios or other document scenarios where you might have a number of appendices or other documents you want to merge together to give you a single file at the end. So previously, we only had the ability to do that as a PDF. We would take all of the Word documents, convert them into PDFs, and then merge the PDFs together. So there's now an option to merge just within Word itself. So if you have a bunch of Word documents, you can merge them all together and keep it as a Word document. And this would be in case you want to assemble various pieces of a contract, but still want to be able to modify it after they've been merged. If you're doing, if your end result is still a PDF, then there are options here where you can either, as I said, we did previously, convert them to PDFs first and then merge, or you can merge them all as a Word document and then convert it in the end. Right, and that's all of our new features for our technical walkthrough. Are there any questions now? If there are any questions, please just put them in the chat. I see one on where we can look up prior webinars. Hero is probably the best one to respond to that.
So this is Hero. Thanks, Craig. So for a recording of this webinar, you can just click the registration link when it's done, and it'll take you to a recording of this webinar. Last year's webinar, we can put that online, but we haven't so far.
Well, prior webinars for prior releases are also shown at our website.
Right, so you can go to our website under Resources.
Release notes. So
and they link to a number of videos on Vimeo as well. So yeah. We've got webinars, we've got training videos on our website under that Resources tab.
Yeah, to go to prior release webinars, you'd go to Resources/Release Notes, and under Release Notes, we have release notes in the webinar for the 2017 and 2016 release webinar. Prior releases, we just have the release notes without a webinar.
There's a question on when this new version will be implemented and available. We obviously have it implemented internally. We're using it ourselves, and we should have an installer available very soon for everyone else. The hosted servers are going to be updated. The hosted share servers are going to be updated over the next several weeks to month. For hosted dedicated servers, we'll be in touch with our hosted dedicated customers for when they want to update. And for customers who are on premise, the link to download the new version should be available soon. The look and feel link, that's a good question, how we want to distribute that. I can put out the link in the chat, or Calvert, I can just email that out to you.
So how do you mean the look and feel link?
So the link to our wiki page that talks about the sync, where we have the link to actually download it.
Isn't that directly available from the wiki?
Yeah, it's just the wiki page itself.
Oh, okay. So just
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, you can go to the wiki right now and go to the appropriate page there and download it.
Yeah.
And just minor correction on Craig, the new release is already available at our website. We're continuing to make minor fixes and polish to it, but it's available today. All of the functionality is included, and we look forward to coming out with point releases for minor enhancements that didn't quite make it into the official release over the course of the next few days.
All right, and I will look up the link for the wiki page to send you. There we go. Okay, thank you, Paul. So Paul just posted the link to the entity set on our wiki page, which has the link for the look and feel scheme download on it. Next question, is there a webinar for this release that is more help desk centric? No, we tried to split this between contract management and help desk. It's mainly focusing on the new features. If you want to discuss how these new features might be applied for help desk in particular, we can discuss that via email or offline. And do we have an example of a populated service desk tasks tab and how to construct a series of tasks for a type of service? We have that actually in our out-of-the-box setup now, and Tim, I can email you about that afterwards. The new trials projects have that set up. There's a good task workflows set up for a lot of them, particularly onboarding, as an example.
On the question of the service desk, I would just note that we have regular get-togethers at the community forum. And last week we had a gathering of folks to talk about how AgileOft is used in Service Desk and how the new features can be used in that context. And Hero will be distributing announcements for the next general gathering where...
Thank you, Colin. That's a good lead-in. We actually have a community chat session planned for tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Pacific time. That will talk about the platform upgrade. So we'll have AgileOft implementers on hand, developers on hand to answer any questions and go over in more detail the upgrades that Craig has just demonstrated. So that's tomorrow at 10 Pacific, 1 Eastern. You can join at community.agileoft.com. Your support username and password are your login credentials to get into the community. Thanks, Colin.
My pleasure.
So I think that answers the next question. Will a user group be created? That is the user group. So go to community.agileoft.com.
And there's a question about, is there any plan to implement a hierarchy or foldering structure within the program, specifically reflected in search results and reporting? We're continuing to look at ways to approach that and best ways of structuring it. It's in discussion with the developers for sort of the best way we might approach it and how our users most want to, how our users would most like to see it and how we can get the most functionality out of that.
Yeah, I would note that we have the ability to display information in a kind of graphical hierarchy today, which Craig demonstrated, I think, in the previous webinar for the hierarchical display of contracts and the ability to explore that display interactively. And of course, it's a general capability, so it can be used to display an org chart, for example, or any other structure. Somebody will be following up with you, Jacqueline, on what exactly you're looking for there. Using a folder structure is something we've considered in the context of contract management as well, but the response to date has not been that this is something which is strongly desired. I happen to be something of an outlier there. I think there would be tremendous value in it, but everybody else seems to disagree. So for once, I'm actually following the feedback that I'm getting from the majority on something like this.
Another question is, the mobile version is responsive. Yes, that is correct. Are there plans for an app for phones? Yes, I believe we're looking into how to market apps specifically. The hurdle we've always had there is that usually apps are sort of a very fixed set of programming, whereas we pride ourselves on being able to be very customized and for an admin to come in and quickly change things around. And we've been looking at how to best map that over to an app usage.
Yeah, and I would say that challenge is still there. We could build an app for the default configuration of AgileOft, but all of our users add custom fields, custom searches, custom tables, complete custom modules. And because of the hard-coded nature of the app, that would simply not be reflected in what you saw in the application. So we're looking to see if there's some subset of AgileOft functionality that we could put into an app that would still provide value, and yet wouldn't have to reflect the deep customizations that folks make to their knowledge bases. Any thoughts that you have on that would be greatly appreciated.
I don't see any other questions coming in. So if there aren't any other questions, or if there are any questions, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll wrap up shortly.
Great, thanks. Another reminder to dial in tomorrow to the community.agiloft.com. Username and support for your login credentials. So I look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.